Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second group of sessions on today's IaCConf. Hope you enjoyed the keynote from Corey. Today we got Matt Gowie from MasterPoint presenting From IaC to Agents, AI's Disruption of Infrastructure Operations. Reminder, the session is open with chat on the right, some Q&A docs, and you can ask questions in the Q&A, which will then bump up those with the highest votes and ask those in the audience Q&A at the end of the session. With that, I'm going to hop off the stage and hand it over to Matt.
Thanks, Gareth. All right. Hey there, folks. My name is Matt Gowie. I am the founder, CEO, CTO of MasterPoint, whatever you want to call me. And today, we're going to be talking about From IaC to Agents, and we'll be focusing in on some of the disruptive technology that is emerging in what we do in infrastructure operations. All right. So I'll start us off with saying something that I think is fairly accepted today, and that is AI is vastly revolutionizing the lives of application engineers, and there's a 100% chance that it is going to do the same for us. And the thing, I think that's an easy thing to say, but the thing that I want to focus on is what does that look like for us in infrastructure operations? If you're a platform engineer watching this talk, what changes for you? If you're in engineering leadership, what does this look like for your teams? So before we get into that, I want to talk a bit about why I'm up here, what my company does, and why I'm giving this talk. So I run a company called MasterPoint. We are an infrastructure as code consulting firm. So we live and breathe Terraform, OpenTofu, and we work with unicorn startups and Fortune 500s to help them scale IaC. We work across many clients and get to see plenty of new environments. And we're a Spacelift certified partner. We love their product, and we're happy they're putting on this conference. And I want to openly answer the question today of what is coming up from my experience on the ground, working across many clients and keeping track of many of the innovators in the space. So this is grounded in what I do in my day-to-day, what my team does in our day-to-day. And what we'll cover today is the current state of infrastructure as code, AI already being here, the emerging ecosystem of tools that are coming up in this new AI wave of software development. And finally, we'll wrap up with the important pieces. Is IaC still the future? What's coming up next? So modern IaC has been around for 10 plus years now. Terraform is 12 years old, came out in 2014. Really started to get adoption in 2016 to 2018. And Terraform, OpenTofu, Pulumi, those tools dominate the market. Even if, CloudFormation, Azure Bicep, Crossplane, they have some market share, but they're very specific to their particular niche or their particular cloud. So the workflow across these tools really hasn't changed. We write code, we plan that desired state against what our cloud currently sits at. We review that plan so we can say, yes, that is actually what I want to do, and then we apply. And the thing is that this works. We've seen massive benefits from IaC when you compare it to the alternatives of just doing ClickOps or writing your own custom scripts. There are a lot of rough edges, though. It has its limits. We've seen plenty of organizations get this wrong. They struggle to build efficient processes around IaC, or they don't even know how inefficient that they are. And that comes down to the fact that there are major pain points in the complexity of IaC today. So let's look at some of those pain points. And I view it as these buckets. There's probably plenty others that could come up if you think about pain from IaC, but lack of best practices and best practices being difficult to nail down, it's hard to build good systems on IaC if you don't have hard-earned experience. State hell and the idea of teraliths, blast radius, lock contention, that is something that I think We at MasterPoint, we talk about it all the time with clients and we help them a lot. And we'll look at a tool later today that deals with it, but state hell is real. Endless plan reviews, the same way that we're all reviewing a ton more code nowadays as we generate more, reviewing plans is painful. It can really bog down and eat away the day. And we've seen plenty of organizations struggle they have difficulty scaling, whether that's scaling root modules and child modules, scaling their automation, scaling policy. And finally, self-service. It's logical with IaC and GitOps, but I see very few teams actually realize major adoption with their application teams when they build it. So we have these major pain points in IaC, and a logical question in the modern era is, can we look at AI to solve these pain points? So yet AI is already here, right? We are already using AI with IaC. We have Cursor and Claude Code and Codex generating decent Terraform today. IaC is a simple language at the end of the day. HCL is a simple language, at least. And you can build a new module or a new set of resources very easily. And that's happening now. It's not the future. It's happening today. We do this with our clients. I'm sure all of you here have generated some IaC to one degree or another, and along with thousands of other teams. But does this solve our problems? Does this solve the pain points that I was just talking about? And I see the answer is no. At MasterPoint, we are still seeing some of the fastest moving software organizations, people who are very deeply ingrained in building good processes, struggle and stumble on the problems that I talked about. And even though they are very AI enabled. So let's jump into a story about one of them. And I think that'll illuminate a bit of what I'm talking about. So this is a story about Cursor. Cursor is the text editor and agent interface that I'm sure many of you know and love. They're a recent MasterPoint client. We are actually wrapping up an engagement with them this month. And they came to us and they had a real problem. Their engineers were waiting 10 plus minutes, sometimes 14 minutes for plans on their critical infrastructure. And my team and I, we worked across a lot of teams. They're one of the fastest agentic coding driven organizations that we've ever worked with. And yet they were running into these problems. And that's unacceptable to them. They were trying to go from new idea to ship to production in an afternoon or a working session. And any slowdown in that line of work is something that they need to optimize. So we rolled up our sleeves and provided our audit and implementation services to help them scale. And at the end of that engagement, now that we're wrapping it up, their plan times dropped to under 2 minutes, which is a nice 80% reduction. And their organization is applying twice as much. They are actually shipping infrastructure twice as fast than they were before. So it is possible to work around these pain points, right? We solved this for Cursor, but it is hard fought. Ultimately, we did that through strong automation pipelines and a platform that really works for them. They're now on Spacelift. We built well-structured code boundaries. We created clear patterns and rich context so that their agents, one of the main ways that they deliver code, now work on better patterns. And they have those patterns to follow as we leave their engagement or leave their ecosystem. So sadly, this isn't possible for everybody. As much as I would like it, MasterPoint can only come in and solve problems for one client team at a time. But what are our options here, right? What can we do to improve this across the industry? And if success like Cursor was hard fought, what can we look at some of the new tools that are coming out? Will they provide the options that enable us to be moving faster without some of those pain points? So let's look at some of those new tools. I see this as the emerging ecosystem. We're going to look at 4 tools today, and I see it as a spectrum. On one hand, you have very light agents agentic solution, light AI, and on the other end, you have fully agentic. We have on the left-hand side of that spectrum, we have enabling agents, and I see that as StateGraph. We next have improving generation and providing guardrails. I see that as Infra CodeBase. We have a completely new IaC tool in the space, Swamp. And finally, we have a fully agentic solution, Intent. Let's start off with StateGraph, and we'll give a quick introduction to each of these tools. StateGraph is a graph-native backend for Terraform State. It is built by the folks at Terra Team. They launched earlier this year. They launched last year. They've come out with a version 1.0 this year, and then they immediately came out with a version 2.0 in a couple months. They're moving fast. They are a Postgres-backed state graph, and they do subgraph plans in seconds. Now, if that doesn't mean much to you, they're doing an innovative thing in the space. They are computing, the way they work is they compute the graph outside of Terraform or OpenTofu, and they create small microstates that get planned and applied. That is the main thing that they are enabling. And the pain point that they're trying to solve is that state hell problem that I talked about before. Teraliths and having too big of a state file, having 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 resources in a state file is a bad problem to have. Causes you to slow down, causes things to be grinding to a halt. They are solving that problem. And the takeaway here is that they are not an AI tool, actually, but they are very agentic first. They're enabling agents by allowing easy state querying, by allowing faster operations within state. Next up, we have Infra CodeBase. Infra CodeBase I see it as governed IaC generation. They are pitched as natural language plus your cloud environment, plus your organizational patterns, creates good production infrastructure as code. They output in all of the major infrastructure as code tools. And the real thing here is that they are governance baked in. I see it as the rule sets, the naming and security and compliance capabilities that they provide as guardrails for your generation are the real selling point. They are trying to solve that problem of best practices being hard to come by. So the takeaway here is I think of this as an IaC agent harness as a SaaS tool. They are enabling you to build IaC quickly with configurable guardrails added. Next up, we have Swamp. Swamp is a very new tool. It's an agent native CLI and automation framework for cloud operations. They are coming out of the folks from System Initiative. Adam Jacob, if you know him from Chef, he built this tool. He built his System Initiative. And this is 5 of the core team members from that team that went on to build Swamp. I believe they did that in about a month, 2 months. And their premise is essentially, maybe the problem isn't AI operating on IaC, maybe it is IaC. So they are saying, hey, the substrate, the underlying language and the way it's approached is the problem. So they built something completely new where they have typed models, explicit workflows, and Git reviewable state. And that is a very local first approach. The pain point they're trying to solve is really that reinventing all of the pain points. Is they're flipping the table. They're saying, hey, let's do it new. And the takeaway there is that this is a completely new IaC tool. It is intended to be agent-driven. Next up and last of the tools that we'll look at is Spacelift Intent. Intent is a natural language interface for cloud provisioning and management. And it's not actually an IaC tool. It's an MCP server for infrastructure provisioning. And the idea that they're doing there is they're translating your natural language into Terraform provider API calls and then storing that in a database and then gating it with OPA. Their pitch is not actually to replace IaC. They are saying Intent is an on-ramp to infrastructure as code. So their idea is you use this for your proof of concept environments, your sandbox environments, your dev environments to build something new. And then you're able to graduate that new change that you just built into infrastructure as code for production. The takeaway there is that they are provisioning infrastructure at the speed of AI, the same way that, hey, we can ask the AWS CLI to go and create us a new, or we can ask Claude Code to use the AWS CLI to go and create us a new VPC, and it can do it in 30 seconds, right? They're doing something similar, but with a governance baked in, and you're able to provision really at the speed of AI, but still have some guardrails for your organization. The pain point they're trying to solve, again, is they're flipping the table. They're reinventing the wheel, or not reinventing the wheel, sorry. They are reinventing to avoid those pain points that we talked about earlier. Now that we reviewed all of these tools, I think that let's reflect a little bit. So I want to go with this quote. I think it's useful to think about all these tools in this lens of vibe coding has transformed how software is built, yet infrastructure automation is still stuck back in time. Marcin from Spacelift said this, and I think I include it because I think it's correct. It feels like application is moving so much faster, and yet I don't know if we're moving at the same pace on the platform side. And all of these tools that we just looked at are attempting in one way or another to solve that. They're trying to solve some of those inherent pain points from IaC, and they're trying to enable a agentic infrastructure as code future. And when we think about solving those problems, when we think about IaC in the future, it leads to what I see as the all-important question that I've been thinking a lot about for a while now. And that is, does IaC stick around? Will we have an IaCConf in a year or 2 years? With Swamp helping facilitate agents against cloud APIs, Intent completely skipping code in general, and natural language provisioning happening now, do we write IaC a year from now? Is it part of our jobs? Is it part of what we do? And I see this as the big question. And my take is yes. IaC isn't going anywhere in the next couple of years. And let's look a little bit about why. Why will IaC persist? IaC is still the best means by which we capture the who, did what, when, and why of our infrastructure in a repeatable way. With Git and IaC tooling, we're able to answer all those questions. And that's extremely important. That's what we cannot do with ClickOps. And this is similar to application code. If the idea of application codes, we have this thought process. If you want to get rid of IaC, I see it as building applications without code. Is that possible? Yes. There are no-code tools out there, but the results are limited. You're not going to be able to build a complex or sustainable system without infrastructure as code. So when you're managing serious complexity, you need something to encode your logic and constraints into, and that is IaC. Code remains the best medium that we as humans have for reasoning about complex systems together. So if IaC does not go away, then what does change? If we are not going to flip the table and do something completely new, what does our future entail? So here's where I'll extrapolate a bit. This is what I believe will happen, or what we'll see over the coming months, years. And I see that a big part of our jobs is going to be distilling context, the rules, skills, and boiling down what is important to your organization as part of your job is going to be a big thing for platform engineers going forward, the same way that it is big for application engineers today. And the teams that codify their best practices in an agent-ready format will vastly speed up their processes. The teams that don't will have agents that randomly break things. And I believe there will be a change in the way that we do proof of concepts, or the way that we do MVPs, where we'll see a push where POCs and sandbox infrastructure will likely be built a lot faster through tools like Intent, or letting an agent use the AWS CLI, for example, or the Azure CLI. And we'll be skipping IaC to start and then building IaC to support future environments. And as we see StateGraph and Swamp work to innovate the existing model that we know, I think we're going to see improved tooling. We can expect that the current tools to also respond in kind to those innovations. I think we can expect that, hey, maybe OpenTofu version 2.0 has a graph-based state backend instead of the JSON files that we have today. So there's innovation that will potentially make big changes to our existing tools. And finally, I think that this isn't a hard thing to say, it's very easy, but guardrails are going to be increasingly important. We don't want the team that shows up, none of us want to be the team that shows up on Hacker News writing the postmortem where our production database and all the backups were deleted. We've seen that story play out a bunch of times with AI in recent months, and I think that that is going to be a big thing where we need to put in guardrails. To keep agents in check, we'll need to have a serious emphasis on this here. And I think that if you're a platform engineer today and you don't know OPA, you don't know how to integrate that into your stack, I would suggest picking it up. What all of this means is that your infrastructure as code and your platform team isn't going away, in my mind. I believe it's going to become more valuable because we are the ones who are going to enable application engineers to ship fast and not break things, that we have a solid future ahead of us. So closing out this talk, I have a final thought here. I can confidently state that agents will operate our infrastructure. They're going to be helping us. The important part to get right for us is making sure that our infrastructure is clear and coherent so they can capably do so. The tools that we looked at today are leading the charge in looking at what they're doing as a result. I believe we'll attain being as fast as our application engineer counterparts. And with that, thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate the attention and interest in this topic. Be sure to scan this QR code at the center of the screen here. Connect with me on LinkedIn, where I post all the time about IaC. Check out the MasterPoint newsletter, which you can find via that QR code. All of that link is also in the docs area of our sidebar here. And finally, if you want to reach out to me about chatting through any of this, more than happy to talk with you. Or if you want to chat about how MasterPoint can help your organization move faster and not break things, please be sure to do so. You can find my email in that QR code as well. And of course, I'd love to answer any questions. So thank you, folks.
Awesome. Great job, Matt. And thanks for everyone for engaging in the chat, adding some questions. We do have some here, which we can, again, prioritize by voting. So if you want to jump in, we've got about 12 minutes here until the next session. So if you've got some additional questions, you want to upvote the ones you like, please do so. But let's start here. So can governance be added to Terraform code generated by AI? This was the top voted question we had.
Yes. So what I talked about with, I think there's a lot of different tools that enable that sort of thing. The things I would look at are OPA, of being able to write policy that says, hey, the infrastructure that we want to provision should only follow these things. And you're able to essentially write policy code that looks at your Terraform or OpenTofu infrastructure as code and decides if it passes a quality gate. Does it create a database with way too large provisioning that your company can't afford? You can write a policy that allows that. You can also look at tools like Checkov and Trivy that enable some level of scanning of your infrastructure as code for compliance or for security issues, that sort of thing. So governance can definitely be added at various layers along the Terraform stack. Usually that's added within your automation tooling. The way that we do it a lot of the time is through Spacelift and writing OPA policies that Spacelift then runs against our code at various stages of the pipeline.
Great. So thank you, Matt. Next question here from Ahmed. What are the most appropriate AI models for IaC Terraform templates?
I think that what are the most appropriate AI models? My organization has been very focused on using Anthropic's Claude models, but I honestly don't believe it matters at the end of the day. Terraform templates is an interesting term. I would essentially look at point point your infrastructure as code at some open source libraries. Look at Cloud Posse, look at what Anton Babenko has been putting out there, and that'll give you a baseline. And then you have some training data for the AI models that you use. But any modern model, whether it's Sonnet or ChatGPT's Codex models or any of those are going to work for you. I don't think there's anyone that really shines out as like the clear winner in that regard. HCL and Terraform, OpenTofu, they're simple language. Like this is not, we are not writing, and it wouldn't matter if they weren't simple because, hey, you can generate plenty good Rust. So I think anything works.
And just a drop for the next session after this, which starts in 9 minutes, is Anton's session where he starts to talk. He goes into depth on Terraform modules and policies. So those interested there will certainly get value out of the next session. So the next question here from Boris: how do you prevent code drift? And that could maybe be tools, process. How do you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, essentially, drift is a two multi-pronged approach. One side of it is, hey, don't allow people to have ClickOps capability within your cloud provider. I think that the more you can restrict your technology organization, your IT organization from having access within console to within any cloud, within any, whether it's GitHub or Datadog or whatever, the more you can restrict down to, hey, they have read-only and you have to see changes through infrastructure as code, the less drift that you'll have. So that is the primary way. That is your end goal, is essentially limiting people to only being able to change the cloud through infrastructure as code. The other option and the other thing to do is preventing code drift. But in terms of you need a tool that is running in the background that is planning your code against your cloud. So you need to be saying on a regular basis, hey, how is my code that I'm running or that I have written and checked into Git, how is that diffing against the cloud? And then you're able, from doing that, to be able to see the drift. You're able to get notified of that. And then you can go ahead and reconcile it, or you can update your code to actually match what the cloud is doing. The tool, again, that we use for that a lot of the time is Spacelift. Spacelift provides drift runs where you can essentially say, hey, every night at midnight, you can do a run and do a plan. And then if there is any differences between what the code says and what we have checked in to the cloud, then send us a notification. And then you can automatically reconcile that. So you can just wipe it away, whatever is in the cloud, or you can, just get notified and get figured it out. But most of the Terraform, OpenTofu tooling that's out there today has that same capability baked in.
Awesome. So you put on your, future lenses here. Tell us about the future here, Matt. So with OpenTofu adding features that Terraform lacks, do you think we're headed towards a permanent split in the community, or will HashiCorp maintain its grip as the industry standard?
See, I like this question because I do have an answer. For any HashiCorp folks, any IBM folks, I'm sorry that I'm going to say this. I apologize. I think that the HashiCorp folks, there is going to be a bigger split. It is going to get harder as we see, I want to see a version 2.0 of Terraform, and I want to see a version 2.0 of OpenTofu at some point. And I hope that they make big changes. I hope that they improve our lives through those tools. But I do see that the split will grow. And I expect that Terraform is not going to win that, because the reality is that the product that they're selling underneath, folks, is 5 to 10x more expensive than their competitors. And that is just something that they have not been willing to budge on. And I don't know anybody who's willing to pay for SaaS today that is 5 to 10x more expensive than other options in the market. So I expect that Terraform will see, we're seeing large adoption of OpenTofu over the years that it's continued to grow, and they've been building really amazing features. So I expect that they will supplant Terraform at some point. Terraform, HashiCorp, IBM, they have the name. They started the game. They really did something amazing, but they are also making choices as a business that actually limit, I believe, their growth, because we know plenty of organizations who are migrating off of that tooling because it is so expensive and because it is actually not even the premier tool in the space. So that's my opinion. It's maybe contrarian to what other people might say, but that's what I think is going to happen.
Great. And just a quick shout out, if people want to learn more about OpenTofu, there's really great recorded talks from the OpenTofu days up on the CNCF site. The last ones just happened in March, and so there's some great talks there. If you want to hear specific about OpenTofu, check those out. All right, a question here. So on the previous session, this is Corey saying, read the plan. In your experience, Matt, where demand is for increased change and increased velocity is symptomatically going upward, how do you resolve this tension to read the plan and apply in production at tempo and scale? So as the number of deployments, the demand is increasing, how do you keep up with that, which is, kind of the whole theme here, keeping pace, right?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So we at MasterPoint are actually building, and I expect to see this be built elsewhere. It's not talking about software. I don't think about anything as proprietary anymore, but we are building the agent that will look at the code changes and look at the plan and essentially do, hey, what's our confidence score that this is exactly what we wanted to do? Is there any drift that got created that we didn't know about that we're about to apply? So I think that there is some, and I'm saying that, hey, we are going to build that internally for ourselves and then be rolling that out to clients. But the idea there is that, hey, AI can help us with reading the plan. I think that there is some viability in terms of, like, if we have a confidence score that a plan is what we want to do, then that makes it so that we can not read the plan. And I think that is something that we will see as part of our future as tools start to be realized, like, oh yeah, that review that a human is doing, we can do some of that with AI. So I expect that we're going to see some of that just get improved, and one of those pain points will start to go away, and that should help us move faster, move in the direction that we want to go.
All right, great. And then I think we got time for one more here, because we've got 2 minutes before the next session starts. This one's from Anton, who's actually presenting the next session. So isn't it time to think again about infrastructure from code, which didn't do well right before AI started? Any thoughts on that? And interesting enough, we did actually have a session last year on infrastructure from code and kind of why that fell out.
Anton's got a good question. I really like it because I could see it. I could see that having its own renaissance. I think the problem there is, as much as we both, I think that, like, the whole DevOps ecosystem was, or the DevOps dream was that we had, like, embedded and we really enabled through culture that application engineers understood cloud operations or infrastructure operations and were able to contribute to that. And I think we have done that to one degree or another. But infrastructure from code brings up this good possibility of, hey, if we enable infrastructure as code for a bunch of application teams, particularly in the enterprise, I could see this happening. It's like, hey, do you end up with 50 databases suddenly, and we result in a lack of checks and balances because we have code that just can spin up whatever it wants? I think I see that as a potential issue. I see that as there should be checks and balances. There should be people who are focused on infrastructure who are actually helping enable, but with guardrails in place, so that application engineers can't spin up 1,000 S3 buckets or create 50 services in a day. So I don't know how it would go. I imagine we could see infrastructure from code tools do better today because of AI. and I could see a larger increase in those tools. And I think I'm at time.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we'll drop a note to that infrastructure from Code Talk in the public chat. All right, next session is starting probably in a few seconds here. Matt, amazing job. Thank you. And thanks for everyone for attending. See you on the next session.
Have a good one.